And first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Golden for her enlightening speech. That was really fascinating. Tonight, I'll be speaking to you about teaching you and your child the language of emotions. Okay, that's how you start. Okay, so the fabric of communication. I want you kind of to imagine like a quilt. Everybody knows what a quilt is? A quilt is like a patchwork of quilt. It has patches and they're all connected. Communication is actually like a quilt. The way we communicate as a couple and the way we communicate with our children as parents and the way we communicate to our friends are actually all related. Okay, so how your child acts socially depends a lot on how you relate to your child. So I want you all to think about that. The way you relate to your child is going to affect the way your child interacts socially in school, on the playground, with his friends. Now, in turn, how your child acts socially is a good predictor to a prediction of how your child will turn out to be. Many people think that academic success is what determines success in life. And I think that the research shows something totally different. The way we are able to communicate and act socially to others in an appropriate fashion will actually determine how we will do. Okay, now I want you to imagine something else. I want you to keep in mind, I think, over here, most of my speech tonight is based on the work also of Dr. John Gottman, and he actually describes 4 types of parents. Tonight I chose 2 which I thought are most important. Okay, so type number 1 are emotion dismissing parents. And I'm sure your wheels are turning and saying, do I belong to this group or I belong to this group? Well, I'm going to already tell you the secret. You really want to belong to this group, the emotional coaching parent, okay? So emotion dismissing parents do not notice lower intensity emotions in their children. And I would like to stop for a minute and explain what that means. What that means is when your 2-year-old sits on the floor and is kicking and screaming and yelling, you all notice that. There's no way you're missing it. However, some of us are going to sometimes miss those little red flags. And what I mean by those little red, thank you. What I mean by those little red, okay. What I mean by those little red flags is when your child is a little sad, when your child is a little happy, when your child is a little angry. We sometimes can miss that. And actually, Dr. Gottman did a study, and he called over some parents, and he asked one of the parents, is your Chaim ever sad? Does he ever get sad? And the parent says, well, actually, 2.5 years ago, once when his grandmother died, yes, he was sad then. That is what I mean by not noticing lower intensity emotion in your children. Because if you think that your child is only sad once in 2.5 years, you missed a lot of red flags, okay? Number 2, they prefer positive emotions and they see negative emotions as poison. And the longer that child will stay with them, the more toxic it will be. So they don't like it. They see it like as something bad when their kid is not, feeling happy or excited. Like when a kid is sad, that's not a good thing. Number 3, it is as if they are doing something wrong if their child is in a negative state. So there's a lot of self-blame. Okay, so if my child is sad, I'm in trouble. I did something wrong. Okay? Number 4, they have little introspection and no detailed vocabulary for emotions. I actually had one parent ask me for a list of emotions because when I say no detailed language of emotions, most of us can name happy, sad, glad, fear, worry, but there's a lot of nuances in between that. You could be fuming, you could be irritated, you could be frustrated. And when we don't kind of say that right, the child's like, no, you're not getting it. That's not what I mean. Oh, sorry. Okay. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Now, let's skip over to the second type, which is emotion coaching parents. They actually do notice low intensity emotions so that they don't have to escalate. Because they notice all the red flags in between, the child doesn't have to turn into, like, they don't have to create a whole drama and keep on going and going and going and going. Second, they view these moments as an opportunity for intimacy. When their child is acting that way, they see it as an opportunity that they can become closer to their child. And they see it as a normal part of development. Children can sometimes be sad. Children can sometimes not be happy. That's the same thing, but okay. And they communicate to their children empathy, and in addition to which, they also communicate that all feelings are acceptable, but misbehavior is not. Actually, the parents that only communicated that, empathy and you're feeling that way, but without the limit setting, those children turned out to be quite aggressive. So limit setting is really a critical part as well. Okay, let's move on. Sorry, I'm going to go 1 second because there was one fascinating thing that I would like to add, and I think that was kind of new to me as well when I researched this presentation. One can be an emotion-dismissing parent while being a very warm parent. And many people confuse a warm parent being an emotion coaching parent. Let me explain that a little more. Meaning to say, you can be warm, but at the same time, dismiss your kid's emotion. And it looks something like this. Chaim, you hurt yourself? Oh, it's nothing. It's nothing. You get over it. It's fine. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And you're hugging your child, and you're kissing your child, and you're thinking, I'm doing great. I am such a loving, warm mother. But at the same time, you're kind of saying, no emotions. Like, it's fine. You get over it. Okay, so those two could go hand in hand. Now let's move on. So the 5 steps of emotional coaching. So how do we become these emotional coaches? That's the next question, right? Step number 1. Are we all following still? I'm just making sure I see like a wonderful crowd here. Okay, so 5 steps. The first step is be aware of your child's emotions. Now, in order to be aware of your child's emotions, you actually need to be aware of your own emotions. So let's define what emotional awareness actually means. Hold on, here we go. Okay. So, research shows that you can be emotionally aware without being highly expressive and without feeling as if you are losing control. What does that mean? So many parents fear that if they're going to be too in touch with their emotions, they're going to lose it in front of their children. If I'm really going to allow myself to become angry, it's not going to be a pretty scene, okay? And that's why they don't want to get in touch with their emotions. So they're fearful of that. Now, emotionally awareness, and here comes the definition, simply means that you can recognize when you're feeling an emotion, you can identify your feelings, meaning to say you know which one it is, and you are sensitive to the presence of emotions in others. Okay? So it's not necessarily about expressing it or about exploding about your emotions. It's about noticing them within you and noticing them within others and knowing what they are. It's very different. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Okay. Step number 2 is attitude. Okay, so they see the emotion as an opportunity for intimacy and teaching. And I think it's like a mindset almost, like a switch in our mindset that we need to make. We are not responsible to fix all our children's problems. We are there to serve as a coach, a helper. And a very heavy load goes off, our parental shoulders when we do that, and we're able to do step number 3 then, which is empathizing and validate your child's feelings. So what does empathize and validate your child's feelings? I think we're starting to hear a lot about the empathy and feeling for your children, but what does it really mean? So So it really means that parents attempt to understand how the child is seeing the world and why he is feeling that way. You almost need to compare it to putting yourself in another person's shoes, okay? That's what really empathy means. And sometimes when parents have a hard time with that, I tell them, compare it to something that would happen to you, okay? So for instance, if Chaim was working on some project and his little brother came and messed up the whole thing, I don't think he's exactly going to like it. So now I'm, as a parent, supposed to imagine that I'm putting myself in this Chaim's shoes. How am I going to do that? One of the ways of doing that is by thinking, if I would be making a 3-layer cake to send over to my very nice neighbor who is making a kiddush, and somebody comes and messes the whole cake out after I worked really hard on it, I'm not going to take it so well. You know what I mean? So really putting myself in my child's shoes can help me understand how he's feeling about this, okay? Actually, Faber and Maslish, they gave 4 steps of how you can do that, because it's a difficult thing to really empathize with your child. Number 1, they say listen quietly and attentively. Be aware of your child and your own body language, facial expressions, and gestures. And I think Dr. Schefter mentioned this in his introduction. You know, you want to be facing your child, number 1. And I'm saying things that are very obvious, but we sometimes forget to do. You want to be facing your child. You want to show him that you're really interested in what he's busy saying. And you want to check out your child's body language, you know, and you're going to be able to read a lot from that. If your child looks like tense and nervous, then you're noticing that already, okay? So you're listening to that and you're starting to understand what he's feeling. Number 2, you can acknowledge their feeling with a word, like saying, oh, I see. Or you can give the feeling a name. That sounds really frustrating. That must have been so annoying. That must have really hurt. And I like this one a lot, and many people use it in combination with step number 3, is you can give the child his wishes and fantasy. I wish Goldie could come over to our house right now. I know we tried to call her so many times, but she's not picking up the phone. I wish I could make a cake appear now and we can have chocolate cake, because your child wants chocolate cake now. I wish I could do it. I know it's so annoying when we want something and we can't have it the minute that we want it. It's really hard, right? Okay. I'm just going for a second. Okay. Now, another interesting point is that the brain actually feels a sense of control when we identify our feelings with language. You have to imagine it like the child is not feeling okay, and you give him a word. It's almost like you're the pilot, and you're saying, this is what, you might be feeling scared, and the child's like, yeah, that's the one, I'm feeling so scared. And that gives a sense of, you got me, I understood, I could calm down now a little bit, okay? Now let's go over to step number 4. That's actually, you see, they run it as the next step, provide verbal labels. Child develops an emotional vocabulary, thereby providing a sense of coping. Number 5, okay? Now sometimes parents and even teachers hopefully skip to step number 5 a little bit too fast. We're all waiting to just fix that problem. But when we don't do step number 1, 2, 3, 4 enough, step number 5 is not going to work. Okay, so we really have to focus on step number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you will almost see step number 5 falling into place. Step number 5 is set limits. So if your child is doing things that are unacceptable, like throwing things, screaming, calling you names, calling your sister names, breaking things, you set limits while helping the child problem solve. So we are also going to want our child to problem solve once the limit was set, not before. Okay. So how do we problem solve? There's really 5 steps to problem solving. 1 is limit setting. Like Genant said, Genant is the teacher of Gatman, and he felt that all feelings are acceptable, misbehavior is not. Now, when we have a problem, we first have to identify what's our goal. What do we really want? This is our problem. Now we're going to have to identify the goal. We're going to have to think of possible solutions. What I like doing by that is, many times I like suggesting a solution that's like over the top. You know, we could really go and fly a plane and pick it up from Eretz Yisrael, that thing we really wanted, and flip it back over here. Am I going to be doing that? No. But what I'm communicating to my child by that is that any idea is possible. Don't be scared to suggest anything. Okay, we're going to write everything down, and if you write everything down, it kind of feels a little bit important, like you're really taking them seriously. Hey, my mother's actually taking the time to write this down. So you're going to start writing down ideas, and you're not going to say, that one doesn't work. Don't negate any ideas, okay? You first get all the ideas. When someone brainstorms, they have to have their head clear so that everything is acceptable. Let's just put everything on the paper, and then you're going to do 4. And 4 is evaluating proposed solutions based on your family values. Now, we're going to have to see what's okay with you, what's okay with me. Maybe the boys or the girls are going to say, Ma, you cannot come to pick me up when it's time for me to go inside because I'm going to be so embarrassed. That you can't do. So, you know what? Let's scratch that one. That obviously is not something that's going to work for you. But you know what? Coming home at 12:30 is not going to work for me either. So let's scratch that one also. You're going to start evaluating. And then 5, helping your child choose a solution. Okay, so you pick one. Now here comes step number 6. That's actually not written on this, but which I feel is very important. And it's called feedback, which we many times forget. Now that your child chose something, now you want him to go and try it out. But you also want him to come back and to tell you whether it worked or didn't work. And if it didn't work, you want to be communicating a message, we'll go to plan B. We'll start thinking again. How are we doing with time? We're good? Okay, so just want to make sure timing. 1 more minute. Okay, we got to finish. I'm actually happy that I only have 1 more minute because I want to rush through this one. Because I don't want you to be saying, I never have time. I always have an audience. This is when emotional coaching is not appropriate. When you are too tired or too upset for coaching to be productive, when your child needs to address serious misbehavior, or when your child is faking emotions in order to manipulate you. So you want to be careful to not say, this is the way my life always is, because if it is that way, you're going to have to evaluate the way you run your life, number 1. Number 2, you want to, if you always have an audience, you always have another sibling, you might want to make time separately for each kid so that they can have that bonding time with you or they can have an emotional moment with you, okay? Which, Baruch Hashem, some of us have large families and need to be doing that. Now, I want to finish off with a quote. The more you try to push, and I think it a little bit summarizes the speech from tonight, it actually comes from a parent who attended a parenting group on this subject. The more you try to push a child's unhappy feelings away, the more he becomes stuck in them. The more comfortably you can accept the bad feelings, the easier it is for children to let go of them. I guess one can say that if you want to have a happy family, you should be prepared to admit the feelings of unhappiness. Thank you so much for listening.